You know, there's an old saying down here in New Orleans that says a man is only as good as the shoes on his feet, and if that's the metric we're using for justice, then I guess I looked guilty as sin that Tuesday morning. The humidity was already at 90% by 8 a.m., the kind of heat that sticks your shirt to your back and makes the air feel like you're breathing through a wet wool blanket. And I was standing outside the federal courthouse on Poydras Street looking like I just crawled out of a swamp. My name is Elias Thorne, and for the last 20 years, I've walked up those marble steps wearing a three-piece Italian suit, polished Oxfords, and the kind of tie that says don't argue with me. But that morning was different because it was the anniversary of the day my wife, Sarah, passed, and before I went to work, I spent 2 hours on my knees in the dirt at the cemetery tending to her rose bushes. I had dirt under my fingernails, a tear in the knee of my old gardening slacks, and a sweat stain blooming on the collar of a faded Saints t-shirt. But I didn't care because I had a 9 a.m. briefing with the mayor, and I figured I'd just slip in the back entrance, shower in my chambers, and put on the spare robe I keep in the closet. I've walked through those doors 5,000 times. I helped write the security protocols for the building after Katrina, so I didn't think twice when I breezed past the new metal detectors toward the employee turnstile. That's when a hand the size of a Ken Ham slammed into my chest, stopping me dead in my tracks. "Ho there, Grandpa," a voice sneered, dripping with that specific kind of arrogance that only comes with a badge and insufficient training. "Where do you think you're going?" I looked up, squinting against the morning sun, and saw a security guard I didn't recognize, a kid, really, maybe 22, looking nervous. But behind him was the problem officer Miller. Now, if you know this city, you know Miller, or you know a guy like him. The kind of cop who wears his tactical vest a little too tight, keeps his sunglasses on inside, and treats the sidewalk like it's his personal kingdom. Miller had been on the force for about 4 years, and in that time, he'd racked up more complaints than arrests. But he was protected. See, his uncle was high up in the union, so Miller walked around like he was untouchable. "I asked you a question, boy," Miller said, stepping around the security desk, his hand resting casually on his taser. "You deaf or just stupid? This is the employee entrance. Deliveries and vagrants go round back to the loading dock." I took a deep breath, trying to keep the rage from boiling over, because I knew the game. I've presided over enough cases to know that if I raised my voice, if I twitched a muscle, I became the aggressor. "I work here, officer," I said, my voice calm, the same voice I used to sentence men to life without parole. "My ID is in my back pocket. If you let me reach for it, don't you move." Miller barked, creating a scene, drawing attention. People in suits, lawyers I've known for decades, were filing past us, eyes glued to their phones, terrified to make eye contact with a black man getting hassled by the police, because in this town, minding your business is a survival instinct. I don't see no badge, I don't see no suit. I see a guy casing the joint, turn around, hands on the wall. "Officer, this is a mistake." I tried again, locking eyes with him. "My name is Elias Thorne. If you check your roster, I don't care if you're the King of England." Miller laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the marble walls. "You fit the description of a suspect we've been looking for. Loitering, suspicious behavior, looking like trash in a federal building. Now, spread 'em." He didn't wait for me to comply. He spun me around, slamming my face into the cold stone wall hard enough to bust my lip. I tasted copper, that familiar metallic tang of violence, and I felt his knee drive into my lower back. The new security guard, the kid, looked like he wanted to say something. He looked scared, but Miller glared at him and said, "Zip it, rookie. Watch and learn how we keep the streets clean." They dragged me outside, not to a quiet room to sort it out, but right out onto the front steps, center stage for the morning rush hour crowd. He wanted an audience. He wanted to humiliate me. He kicked my legs apart, wider than necessary, tearing the fabric of my slacks further. "You got anything on you that's gonna stick me?" he asked, patting me down aggressively, his hands lingering too long, searching for a reason, any reason, to escalate. "I have a phone and a wallet," I said, staring at the concrete, counting to 10 in French. A trick Sarah taught me to keep my blood pressure down. And I have a scheduled meeting with the mayor in 20 minutes that I really shouldn't be late for." Miller laughed again, and this time his partner, a guy named Wilson who usually just followed Miller around like a lost puppy, joined in. "Hear that, Miller? He's got a meeting with the mayor. Probably gonna ask him for spare change." "Yeah," Miller grunted, clicking the handcuffs onto my wrists tight to tight, the metal biting into the bone. Maybe he's the mayor's new gardener, although looks like he's been sleeping in the dirt, not working in it. A small crowd had started to gather on the sidewalk, tourists with their cameras, a few legal clerks smoking cigarettes, and then, thank God, Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins has run the court filing office since before I passed the bar exam. She's 70 years old, 5 foot nothing, and terrifying. She came bustling out of the revolving doors, took one look at me in cuffs, and dropped her coffee cup. "Officer Miller," she screamed, her voice cutting through the noise. "What in the name of all that is holy are you doing? Unhand him this instant." Miller smirked, puffing out his chest. "Back up, lady. This is police business. We caught this guy trying to bypass security. Probably armed." "Armed?" Mrs. Higgins looked like she was about to have a stroke. "Are you insane? That is Judge Thorne. That is the Chief Justice of this circuit." You could hear a pin drop. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. I turned my head just enough to see Miller's face. For a second, just a split second, I saw a flicker of doubt, a tiny crack in the armor. But then his ego took over, that dangerous, fragile ego that can't admit a mistake. He doubled down. "Judge, yeah, right?" Miller scoffed, tightening his grip on my arm. "And I'm the Pope. Look at him, Higgins. He's dirty, he's bleeding, and he's got no ID. He's probably just some old drunk you feel sorry for. You interfere again, and I'll arrest you for obstruction." "I have my ID," I said, my voice low and dangerous now. "It's in my back pocket. The leather wallet. Open it." Miller hesitated. The crowd was filming now. 20 iPhones held up like vigilant eyes. He knew he had to play this out. He reached into my pocket, fishing out my worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, ignoring the driver's license, ignoring the gold American Express card, looking for, I don't know, a reason to hate me more. Then his thumb brushed over the flap, flipping it open to reveal the gold medallion embedded in the leather, the seal of the federal court, the words Chief Justice Elias Thorne engraved in bold, black letters. Miller stared at it. He blinked. He looked at the badge, then at me, then back at the badge. His face went pale, then red, then a sickly shade of gray. But he didn't uncuff me. He couldn't. In his mind, if he uncuffed me now, he admitted defeat. He closed the wallet and shoved it into his own pocket. "Fake," he announced loud enough for the cameras. "Nice try, buddy. Possession of a forged federal document, that's a felony. Now you're really in deep." Wilson, his partner, looked nervous. Miller. That looked pretty real to me. "Maybe we should run it." I said. "It's fake," Miller shouted, spit flying from his lips. He was panicking, cornered by his own prejudice. "Get him in the squad car. We'll sort this out at the precinct where we don't have an audience." They started to shove me toward the curb, and I realized something. They weren't taking me to the precinct to book me. They were taking me somewhere to teach me a lesson before they realized their mistake. Somewhere off camera where I might accidentally fall down some stairs. I planted my feet. I'm 60 years old, but I boxed in the Navy, and I know how to make myself heavy. "I am not getting in that car," I said, locking eyes with the security camera, mounted above the courthouse entrance, and Officer Miller. "Before you take another step, I want you to recite the Fourth Amendment for me." "Shut up." Miller shoved me, but I didn't budge. "You can't recite it because you don't know it," I continued, projecting my voice so the crowd could hear. "You swore an oath to uphold a constitution you haven't even read. You have detained a citizen without probable cause. You have used excessive force. And now, you are attempting to destroy evidence by concealing my identification." I said, "Get in the car." Miller pulled his baton. The crowd gasped. A woman screamed. This was it. The moment it goes from bad to tragic. I braced myself for the blow, tightening my stomach muscles, preparing for the crack of steel on bone. But the blow never came. From down the street, a siren wailed, short and sharp, a VIP escort to black SUV screeched to a halt right in the loading zone, blocking Miller's squad car. The doors flew open, and out stepped District Attorney Sarah Jenkins. Flanked by the police commissioner himself, they were there for our 9 a.m. meeting. Sarah took one look at the scene, the crowd, the baton raised in the air, the blood on my lip, the handcuffs, and she didn't scream. She didn't panic. She just walked up the stairs with the icy calm of a woman who has put serial killers on death row. She stopped 3 feet from Miller, looked at his baton, looked at his face, and said 2 words, "Drop it." Miller froze. "Ma'am, stay back. This suspect is resisting." I said, "Drop it," she repeated, her voice like a whip crack. "And then give me the keys to those cuffs before I have the commissioner strip you naked right here." On Poydras Street, Miller lowered the baton. Slowly. "You know this guy, know him?" The commissioner stepped forward, looking like he wanted to vomit. "You idiot. That's the man who signs your paychecks. That's the man who signs your warrants. You just assaulted the highest-ranking judge in the state." Miller looked at Wilson. Wilson took a step back, raising his hands. "I told him, Commissioner. I told him to check the ID. He wouldn't listen." "Shut up, Wilson," Miller hissed. But the fight was draining out of him. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, and the realization hit him like a freight train. He fumbled for the keys. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped them twice. The metal clattered on the concrete, a sound of pure defeat. He finally got the key in the lock. The cuffs clicked open. I rubbed my wrists, feeling the bruises forming. "The raw skin." I didn't say thank you. I didn't smile. I reached into Miller's pocket. He flinched, but didn't dare move, and pulled out my wallet. I flipped it open, showing the badge to the camera phones recording us. "Officer Miller," I said, my voice quiet, terrifyingly calm. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest, for the first time in your life, you use it." But I wasn't done. Oh no. The parking lot was silent, waiting for the explosion, waiting for me to yell or hit him back. But that's not how justice works. Justice is cold. Justice is precise. And I was about to hold court right there on the sidewalk. "Commissioner," I said, turning to the man who was currently turning a deep shade of purple. "I assume you have your tablet with you. Access to the personnel files." "Yes, Your Honor." "Of course. Good," I said, wiping the blood from my lip with the back of my hand. "Pull up Officer Miller's file. Badge number 5942. I want to read something to the class." Miller looked like he wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had encircled us. The SUVs blocked the street. He was trapped in the glare of his own making. "Let's see here," I said, stepping closer to Miller, invading his personal space just like he had mine. Complaint filed June 4th. Excessive force against a teenage boy selling water. Dismissed by Internal Affairs. Complaint filed August 12th. Racial profiling during a traffic stop. Video malfunctioned. Dismissed. Complaint filed September 30th. I went on for 2 minutes. 17 complaints. 17 times he had hurt someone, scared someone, bullied someone. And 17 times the system I had dedicated my life to had failed to stop him. The crowd murmured with every date, every accusation. Miller was shrinking, physically shrinking, his posture collapsing under the weight of his own history being read aloud. "You see, Officer Miller," I said, closing the mental file, "you made a calculation today. You saw a black man in dirty clothes and you did the math. You thought, I can hurt him, I can humiliate him, and no one will care because he's nobody. That's your math, isn't it?" Miller stared at his boots. I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" I laughed, and it hurt my split lip. "No, protocol is asking for ID. Protocol is de-escalation. What you were doing." The commissioner didn't hesitate. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He turned to Miller, his face hard. "Badge and gun, Miller. You're done." Miller looked up, tears of rage and humiliation welling in his eyes. "You can't do this. I have rights. This is a setup." He provoked me. "Give it up," Derek Wilson, his partner, said quietly, stepping away from him. "It's over." Miller slowly unholstered his weapon, handing it to the commissioner butt first. Then he unpinned the shield from his chest. When he handed it over, he looked naked. Without the badge, without the gun, without the authority he abused. He was just a bully in a polyester shirt standing in a parking lot. The commissioner handcuffed him gently, far more gently than he had cuffed me, and led him toward the back of the SUV. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just clapping. It was a release. A primal scream of vindication from people who had watched this happen 1,000 times. With a different ending, I stood there, rubbing my wrists, feeling the adrenaline dump leave me shaking. Sarah Jenkins walked over, handing me a handkerchief. "Elias," she whispered, "are you okay?" "No, Sarah," I said, looking at the blood on the white cloth. "I'm not okay. If I wasn't me, if I was just Elias the gardener, I'd be in the back of that squad car right now getting my ribs broken. That's not okay." I looked around the crowd. I saw the faces, fear mixed with awe, and I saw the security guard, the kid, Kyle. He was standing by the door, looking like he wanted to disappear into the bricks. "You," I pointed at him. "Come here." Kyle walked over, his legs shaking. "Judge Thorne, I swear, I tried to tell him. I didn't know." "Stop," I said. You knew something was wrong. I saw it in your eyes. You saw a bully hurting an old man and you wanted to speak up, but you were scared. You were scared of his badge. You were scared of his volume." Kyle nodded, looking at the ground. "Yes, sir. Fear's a reaction," I told him, loud enough for the rookie cops standing by the perimeter to hear. "Courage is a decision. Next time, you decide. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry, sir." "Don't be sorry," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Be better." I went inside then. I didn't shower. I didn't change. I walked into the conference room for the 9 a.m. meeting wearing my dirt-stained gardening pants and my torn t-shirt with a busted lip and swollen wrists. The room was full of high-priced lawyers, city council members, and lobbyists. When I walked in, the conversation died instantly. I sat at the head of the table. I placed my gold badge in the center of the mahogany surface. It clinked loudly. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, "we're throwing out the agenda. Today we're going to talk about why the man who runs this building couldn't walk into it without bleeding." That meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end of it, we had drafted a new oversight committee. We had rewritten the engagement protocols for courthouse security. We had initiated a review of every single arrest Officer Miller had made in the last 4 years. And let me tell you, that opened a Pandora's box that ended up freeing 3 innocent men who had been framed by him and his buddies. But the real fight was in the courtroom 6 months later. The state versus Derek Miller. I recused myself, obviously. Judge Harrison presided. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken. Miller's lawyer tried everything. He argued stress. He argued fear for his life. He tried to paint me as an agitator who deliberately dressed down to provoke a reaction. It was disgusting, but it was expected. But then they played the tapes. Not just the security footage from that morning, but the dashcam footage from Miller's car that my office subpoenaed. We found audio of him laughing about breaking a suspect's fingers. We found video of him planting a baggie of weed in a college student's backseat. The jury watched in silence. When the verdict came down guilty on all counts, Miller didn't cry. He just stared at me across the courtroom. I was sitting in the back row, wearing my best suit. He mouthed something at me. I think it was "you got lucky." And he was right. I did get lucky. I walked out of the courthouse that day, down the same steps where I'd been arrested. The sun was shining, but the air still felt heavy. A young woman approached me, holding a microphone. "Local news. Judge Thorne," she asked, "do you feel justice was served today?" I looked at the spot on the concrete where my blood had dripped 6 months ago. It had been washed away, but I knew it was there. Justice. I looked at the camera. Justice would be a world where Officer Miller saw a black man in gardening clothes and offered to hold the door, not apply handcuffs. What we got today wasn't justice. It was accountability. And there is a hell of a difference between the two. I walked to my car, got in, and drove not to my house, but to the cemetery. I knelt down by Sarah's grave. The roses were blooming, bright red against the gray stone. I pulled a weed from the soil, getting dirt under my fingernails again. I thought about what Miller said. You got lucky. He was right. If I hadn't had that badge in my pocket, if the DA hadn't shown up at that exact second, my life would be ruined. I'd be just another case number, another mugshot on the news with a caption about resisting arrest. And that's the part that keeps me up at night. That's the part